I walked out of my burning apartment with nothing but smoke in my lungs and my phone in my hand, and I thought losing everything was the worst part. Then my parents said, "Not our problem," like I was a stranger asking for a favor. But when a fire investigator called me by name and started asking about missing footage, shadow logs, and who really owned my building, I realized the fire didn't just take my home, it was trying to take my voice. The smell hit me before the sound did. It was not the cozy, wood smoke scent of a fireplace in December, nor was it the charred drift of burnt toast from a neighbor having a bad morning. It was sharp, chemical, and invasive. It tasted like melting plastic and scorched hair, a flavor that coated the back of my throat and woke me from a dead sleep with a violent jolt. My eyes snapped open, staring into the dark of my bedroom. For a second, I lay there paralyzed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Then came the sound. Thud. 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 Heavy. Panicked footsteps were pounding down the hallway outside my apartment door. Someone screamed, a sound that was cut short, muffled by the walls but distinct enough to curdle the blood in my veins. Fire. The word did not form in my mind as a thought, but as an instinct, a primal command that bypassed logic and seized control of my limbs. I threw off the duvet, the cool air of the room hitting my sweat-damp skin. I did not have time to dress. I did not have time to think. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor. The air in the room was already hazy, a thin gray veil drifting near the ceiling, illuminated by the street lamp outside my window. I lunged for the nightstand. My fingers fumbled, knocking over a glass of water that shattered wetly against the floor. But I managed to close my hand around the cold metal of my keys and the rectangular weight of my phone. That was it. That was all I grabbed. I ran to the front door, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. I reached for the handle, but heat radiated through the wood, pressing against my palm from inches away. I hesitated, terror seizing me. If I opened this door, would I be met with a wall of flame? But there was no fire escape on my window. We were on the 3rd floor. I had no choice. I turned the lock, held my breath, and yanked the door open. The hallway was a tunnel of gray smoke, thick and roiling, stinging my eyes instantly. The ceiling lights were flickering, casting strobe-like shadows that danced violently against the peeling wallpaper. Down the hall, near the stairwell, the smoke was blacker, denser. I stepped out, coughing immediately, the acrid taste filling my mouth. I looked back, just for a fraction of a second, toward the sanctuary I was leaving behind. Orange light was blooming under the door of the apartment across from mine. It was not a flicker. It was a steady, hungry glow that seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting. The paint on the neighbor's door was bubbling. I turned and ran. My bare feet struck the dirty industrial carpet of the hallway, feeling the heat rising through the floorboards. I joined the stream of other tenants, ghostly figures in pajamas and bathrobes emerging from the haze. No one spoke. There was only the sound of coughing, the wet slap of feet, and the deep, guttural roar of the beast eating our building. We spilled into the stairwell. The air here was cooler but still thick with the smell of disaster. I gripped the cold metal railing, sliding my hand down it as I descended, skipping steps, nearly tripping over the hem of my oversized sleep shirt. Behind me, I heard the crash of something heavy falling, followed by the shattering of glass. By the time we burst out the front door and into the biting chill of the night air, my lungs felt raw, as if I had swallowed sandpaper. The street was chaotic. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closing in like a pack of wolves. I stumbled away from the building, my legs shaking so hard they felt made of water. I made it to the curb across the street and collapsed, the asphalt rough and icy against my skin. I looked up, the building, a 4-story brick structure that had been my home for 3 years, was bleeding smoke into the night sky. Flames were licking out of the 3rd floor windows. My floor. I watched, numb, as the fire shattered the glass of my living room window. A tongue of orange fire lashed out, defiant and terrible, illuminating the darkness. It was mesmerizing in a horrific way. It looked alive. Then the realization hit me, not all at once, but in a series of sickening punches to the gut. My laptop, it was sitting on the coffee table. I had been working late on the quarterly reports. Every file, every contact, the entire project I was leading for the firm, it was on that machine. I had not backed it up to the cloud in 3 weeks. My savings envelope. I was not someone who trusted banks implicitly, a habit I had picked up from my grandmother. I kept $2,000 in cash, tucked inside a hollowed-out book on the bottom shelf of my bookcase. It was my emergency fund, my escape hatch. The money I had scraped together by skipping lunches and walking instead of taking the subway. My hand went to my neck, fingers grasping at empty air. My grandmother's locket, it wasn't on me. I had taken it off before showering and left it on the bathroom sink. It was a simple silver oval with a dent in the side, holding a picture of her from 1952. It was the only thing of hers I had left. Gone. I watched a firefighter in heavy gear smash an axe through the window of what used to be my kitchen. Sparks cascaded down the brick facade like a hellish waterfall. "Move back! Everyone move back!" A police officer shouted, waving a flashlight beam that cut through the smoke. I scrambled backward, my heels scraping the pavement. I was 32 years old. I had a degree. I had a job. I paid my taxes. I had a credit score of 720. And in the span of 12 minutes, I had been reduced to a shivering woman on a curb, owning nothing but a pair of cotton pajamas and a dying cell phone. I sat there for hours. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a cold that seeped into my bones. The fire was eventually tamed, beaten back into steaming, blackened submission. But the damage was done. My apartment was a black hole in the side of the building. Around 4 a.m, a bus arrived to take us to a temporary shelter set up at the community center 6 blocks away. I boarded it like a zombie, wrapping a foil blanket a paramedic had given me tighter around my shoulders. The community center smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Cots were arranged in rows on the basketball court, looking like a grim parody of a slumber party. People were crying, soft, muffled sobs that echoed off the high gymnasium ceiling. A volunteer with kind eyes and a clipboard took my name, checked me off a list, and handed me a bottle of water and a hygiene kit that contained a toothbrush and a comb. I sat on the edge of a cot, clutching the water bottle until the plastic crinkled. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. It was the shock. I knew, but it was also the sudden, crushing weight of reality. I needed help. I stared at my phone. The battery icon was red, showing 12%. I had to make the call now, before it died. I scrolled to Mom/Dad in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the name. We were not close. Not in the way some families were. We did not do Sunday dinners or group texts, but they were my parents. They were the safety net that was supposed to catch you when the high wire snapped. I pressed the call button. It rang 4 times, then a click. "Hello?" My mother's voice was groggy, laced with the irritation of being woken before dawn. "Mom," I said, and my voice cracked. I sounded small, pathetic. "Mom, there was a fire." "A fire?" Her tone shifted, but not to panic. It shifted to caution. "Where? Are you hurt?" "My apartment building," I stammered, holding the phone with both hands to keep it steady. It's gone. Mom, everything is gone. I'm at a shelter at the community center on 4th. I don't have shoes. I don't have my laptop. I don't know what to do." There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy pause that stretched out until I thought the connection had dropped. "Is Willow all right?" I heard my father's voice in the background, muffled. "She says her building burned down," my mother said to him, her voice away from the receiver. "Mom?" I whispered. She came back on the line. "Willow, that is terrible. Thank goodness you are physically unharmed. That is the important thing." Her voice was flat, smooth, like a stone skipping over the surface of a deep, dark lake, refusing to sink. "I have nowhere to go," I said, the desperation leaking into my voice despite my best efforts to contain it. "I'm at a shelter, but I can't stay here. I have work tomorrow, or today, I guess. I lost my keys, my wallet, everything." I waited for the magic words. "Come home. We will come get you. Don't worry." "Well," my mother said, and I could hear the hesitation. "That is a very difficult situation." "Let me talk to her," my father said. There was a fumbling sound, and then my father's voice filled my ear. It was deeper, firmer, the voice of a man who solved problems by closing doors on them. "Willow," he said, "listen to me. You need to get a hold of yourself. Panic is not a strategy." "I'm not panicking, Dad. I'm in shock. My apartment burned down." "I understand that," he said. His tone clipped. "But crying about it isn't going to put the fire out. You have insurance, don't you? You have renter's insurance?" "Yes, but—" "Good. Then you file a claim. That is the first step." "Dad, I need a place to sleep tonight. Just for a night or two. Until I can figure out the insurance. Until I can get a new ID and access my bank account." Silence again. This one felt colder. It felt intentional. "Willow," he said. And the way he said my name made me feel like I was 6 years old and had just broken a vase. "You are 32 years old. You are an adult. You wanted to move to the city. You wanted to be independent. This is what independence looks like. It means dealing with crises." The air in the gymnasium seemed to vanish. I couldn't breathe. "I'm asking for help," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm asking my parents for help because I'm standing barefoot in a gym and I have nothing. We can't just drop everything and drive into the city. Willow, it's a 3-hour drive. And the guest room is full of your mother's crafting supplies right now. It's not set up for guests." Guests. I was not his daughter. I was a guest, an inconvenient one. "We can send you a list of resources," my mother chimed in from the background. "There are organizations. Willow, the Red Cross. They help with this sort of thing." "Resources," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Figure it out." "Willow," my father said. "It builds character. Call us when you have a plan. We can't solve this for you." "Dad, please. Good luck. Willow, stay safe." The line went dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at the screen. The call had lasted 2 minutes and 14 seconds. That was the value of my devastation to them. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of inconvenience. I lowered the phone, a tear, hot and humiliating, tracked down my soot-stained cheek. I wiped it away angrily with the back of my hand. Around me, families were huddled together, parents wrapping arms around children, whispering assurances. I sat alone, wrapped in foil. Realizing that the fire hadn't just taken my possessions, it had illuminated the structural rot in the foundation of my life. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the sunrise through the high windows of the gym, watching the sky turn from black to a bruised purple by 8 in the morning. The adrenaline had completely vanished, leaving behind a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. I had washed my face in the bathroom sink and tried to comb the tangles out of my smoke-smelling hair. The volunteers had a box of donated clothes. I found a pair of jeans that were 2 sizes too big and a gray sweatshirt that said University of Michigan on it. I put them on. They smelled like someone else's laundry detergent. I needed to go back. I needed to see it in the daylight. I walked the 6 blocks back to my apartment building. My bare feet were now encased in a pair of white canvas sneakers someone had donated. They pinched my toes. The building looked like a corpse. The blackened windows were like empty eye sockets. The smell was even stronger now, a wet, rotting charcoal stench that permeated the entire block. Yellow police tape crisscrossed the front entrance. A man was standing near the tape, talking to a police officer. He was wearing a beige trench coat that looked expensive and pristine. A stark contrast to the grime around him. His hair was gelled back perfectly. It was Brent Halden, my landlord. I walked over to him. He saw me approaching and his face arranged itself into a mask of practiced concern. It was a shifting of muscles that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Bryant?" he said, stepping away from the cop. "Oh, goodness. I am so glad to see you are safe. I was going down the tenant list, praying everyone got out." "I got out," I said, my voice raspy. "I lost everything, Mr. Halden." "It is a tragedy," he said, nodding solemnly. "A terrible tragedy. But we must be grateful for life, yes? Material things can be replaced." He reached into his coat pocket. I thought, for a foolish second, he was going to offer me cash, or a hotel voucher, or an apology. He pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "Now, obviously, this is a chaotic time," he said, his voice dropping to a confidential, businesslike pitch. "But there are procedures we need to follow for the insurance companies, to expedite your claims, of course." He thrust the papers at me. "What is this?" I asked, not taking them. "Just standard liability release forms and a confirmation of the lease termination due to the destruction of the premises. It releases your security deposit back to you immediately. I know you can use that money. You want me to sign legal documents right now?" I looked at him, incredulous. "I haven't even had a shower. Mr. Halden, I don't have my glasses. I don't have a lawyer." "It's standard. Willow. Can I call you Willow? It helps you. It gets the money in your pocket faster. We're all victims here. The building is a total loss for me. To..." He pressed the papers into my hand. I took them automatically, my brain too foggy to fight. "Just look them over," he said, flashing a tight, white smile. "Get them back to me by tomorrow? I'll be at the property management office." He patted my shoulder. His hand felt heavy and patronizing. Then he turned back to the police officer, dismissing me as if I were a task he had just checked off his list. I stood there, holding the papers, feeling a sudden surge of nausea. "Don't sign those!" The voice came from behind me. I turned to see a woman standing a few feet away. She was short, with curly dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and a thick knitted scarf wrapped around her neck. She was holding a travel mug of coffee like a weapon. "Excuse me?" I said. "The papers," she said, nodding at the bundle in my hand. "Don't sign them. Not until someone who isn't on Halden's payroll reads them." She stepped closer, extending a hand. "Marisol K. I lived in 4B, down the hall from you." "Willow Bryant," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused. "I know," she said. "I've seen you in the laundry room. You're the quiet one who actually sorts her recyclables." I managed a weak, tired smile. "That's me." "Look," Marisol said, lowering her voice and glancing toward where Halden was standing. "Halden Properties is a snake pit. They have a reputation in this neighborhood. They buy old buildings, do the bare minimum to keep them standing, and ignore safety complaints until something breaks or burns." I looked at the blackened shell of my home. "You think this was negligence?" "I think the fire alarm on the 4th floor didn't go off for 3 full minutes last night," Marisol said grimly. "I think the emergency exit in the rear stairwell was stuck. I saw Mrs. Higgins trying to kick it open. If the firefighters hadn't come through the front when they did." She trailed off, shaking her head. "He said it helps us get our deposit back," I said, looking at the papers. "He wants you to sign away your right to sue," Marisol said sharply. "Read the fine print. If you sign that, you're saying the fire wasn't their fault, and you accept the deposit as full and final settlement. Don't do it. Willow." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad. She scribbled a number on it. "We're organizing," she said. "The tenants. We need to stick together. Halden is going to try to pick us off one by one while we're shocked and desperate. Don't let him." She handed me the paper. I took it, feeling a flicker of something that wasn't quite hope, but was perhaps clarity. "Thanks, Marisol. Get some rest," she said, looking at my pale face. "You look like you're about to fall over." She walked away, heading toward a group of people arguing with a Red Cross volunteer. I turned back to the building. The firefighters were rolling up their hoses, thick yellow snakes dragging through the slush and ash. I walked along the perimeter tape, heading toward the rear of the building, drawn by a morbid curiosity to see the back entrance Marisol had mentioned. The alleyway was wet and smelled of garbage and smoke. The rear door was propped open, charred black. Above it, mounted on the brick, was a security camera. I stopped. I knew that camera. I had noticed it 100 times when I came in with groceries. It was a dome camera, usually pointed directly at the door handle and the keypad. But it wasn't pointed there now. It was angled away. It was twisted to the left, pointing toward the blank brick wall of the adjacent building. I squinted. The bracket holding it didn't look broken. It didn't look like it had been hit by falling debris. The soot on the camera housing was uniform, except for a small smudge near the base, like a thumbprint in the grime. It looked like it had been nudged, deliberately. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter air went down my spine. I looked around, but no one was watching me. I took a mental picture of the camera, cataloging the angle, the strangeness of it. Why would a camera look at a wall? I didn't have time to solve mysteries. I had to survive. I spent the rest of the day in a blur of bureaucracy. I went to the DMV to apply for a replacement license, waiting in line for 3 hours only to be told it would be mailed in 10 days. I went to a bank branch, where a sympathetic teller helped me access my account using my social security number and verify my identity. I withdrew $400. It was all I could take out without a card. I found a motel on the edge of the industrial district, the Starlight Inn. The sign was missing the L and the G, so it read, Star Hit Inn. It seemed appropriate. The room cost $89 a night. I paid for 3 nights. That left me with barely enough for food. My credit card was nearly maxed out from a car repair last month, a car I had sold 2 weeks ago to save on parking fees. The irony was bitter. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The carpet was sticky. I sat on the bed, the springs groaning under me. I pulled out my phone, 9% battery. I plugged it into the charger I had bought at a drugstore with my cash. I needed to work. I needed to tell my boss. I opened my email app. My thumb hovered over the compose button. But before I wrote to my boss, I went to my sent folder. I searched for maintenance. There it was, an email from 3 weeks ago. To support@haldenproperties.com. Subject, urgent, flickering outlet. Unit 304, Mr. Halden. The outlet in the living room near the radiator is sparking when I plug things in. It smells hot. Please send someone to look at it. I clicked on the thread. There was a reply from the automated system. Ticket number 4092 created, and then another email, dated 2 days later. Ticket number 4092. Status update. Resolved. Notes. Technician inspected. No issue found. Tenant advised. I stared at the screen. My breath hitched. No one had ever come. I had worked from home that entire week. No technician had knocked on my door. No one had inspected anything, and I certainly hadn't been advised. They had closed the ticket without doing the work. Lying bastards, I whispered to the empty room. I switched to my work email. I typed a message to my boss. Sarah. I tried to keep it professional. Sarah, I'm writing to let you know I've had a personal emergency. There was a fire in my building last night. I've lost my laptop and my badge. I'm safe, but I'm currently displaced. I will do my best to get back online as soon as possible, but I may need a day to sort out logistics. I hit send. I waited. The minutes ticked by. I watched a cockroach crawl up the wall near the bathroom. The phone buzzed. From Sarah Jenkins. Subject, personal emergency Willow. I heard about the fire on the news. I'm glad you're safe. That is scary stuff. Regarding work, without your laptop and badge, you can't access the secure servers. Compliance is very strict about remote access from non-company devices. Until IT can provision a new machine and we can get you a new badge, you won't be able to log hours. HR says we have to put you on unpaid administrative leave until they figure out next steps. Let me know when you have a permanent address so we can ship a laptop. Best, Sarah. Unpaid. I dropped the phone on the bedspread. Unpaid leave. No apartment. No savings. No parents. I stood up and walked to the mirror above the dresser. The glass was cracked in the corner. I looked at myself. My face was streaked with gray. My eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. My hair, usually kept in a neat bob, was a wild, smoky mess. I reached into the pocket of the donated jeans and pulled out the only form of identification I had left, my work ID badge. It had been in my pocket when I ran out because I had worn it home and forgotten to take it off the night before. The plastic was warped from the heat. The photo of me, smiling, professional, wearing a blazer, was stained with yellow smoke residue. The woman in the picture looked like a stranger. She looked naive. She looked like someone who believed that if she followed the rules, worked hard, and saved her money, she would be safe. I looked from the photo to my reflection. The fire had taken my clothes. It had taken my grandmother's locket. It had taken my home. But the phone call with my parents, that had taken something else. It had taken the invisible floor beneath my feet. It had taken the assumption that I mattered. "You're an adult," my father had said. "Figure it out." I touched the cold glass of the mirror. "Okay," I whispered, and my voice sounded different, harder. "I'll figure it out." I turned off the light and lay down in the dark, listening to the sirens outside, waiting for a sleep that I knew wouldn't come. The morning after the fire, the city set up a triage center in the gymnasium of the local high school. 3 streets over from the smoldering ruin of my life, the air inside smelled of floor wax and collective despair. I sat on a metal folding chair, clutching a numbered ticket, 42, and waited for my turn to speak to a representative from the Department of Buildings. I was wearing the same oversized university sweatshirt from the donation bin, though I had managed to scrub the soot from my face in the motel sink. When my number was called, I walked to a folding table where a woman with tired eyes and a perfectly pressed blouse sat behind a laptop. She did not look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, hit enter with a flourish, and then offered me a smile that was tight, practiced, and did not reach her eyes. "Name?" she asked. "Willow Bryant," I said. "Apartment 304. She typed it in. "Okay, Ms. Bryant, we have you listed. I have a packet here for you." She slid a glossy pamphlet across the table. The cover featured a stock photo of a diverse group of people holding hands under a blue sky. The title read, "Recovering and Rebuilding, a Guide for Displaced Residents." "This lists shelters, food banks, and counseling services," she said, her tone reciting a script she had already memorized. "It also has numbers for the Red Cross and the Salvation Army." "I don't need a pamphlet," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking of my hands beneath the table. "I need to know what happened. I need to know why the alarms on my floor didn't sound until the smoke was already in the hallway." The woman's smile faltered, just for a second, before reassembling itself. "The official report is still pending, Ms. Bryant. These things take time. Fire marshals have to be thorough." "I have emails," I said, leaning forward. "I have emails proving I reported electrical issues 3 weeks ago. Issues that were marked resolved without anyone entering my apartment." She blinked, her face closing off. She looked like a bank teller denying a loan. "As I said, the investigation is ongoing. However, the preliminary assessment suggests the cause was likely electrical in nature. Old wiring in these pre-war buildings can be unpredictable." "Likely electrical," I repeated. It felt like a dismissal. It felt like she was saying bad luck. "We expect the full report in 6 to 8 weeks, she said, tapping the pamphlet. "In the meantime, please utilize these resources. Next, please." I was dismissed. I took the pamphlet, feeling the urge to crumple it into a ball and throw it at her. But I didn't. I walked away, the paper feeling slick and useless in my hand. That evening, I did not go back to the motel immediately. Marisol K., the woman who had warned me about the insurance papers, had texted me an address. It was a church basement, 5 blocks from our building. Tenants meeting. The text had said, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. The basement was dimly lit, smelling of damp wool and old hymnals. About 20 of us were gathered there, sitting in a circle on mismatched chairs. I recognized faces from the hallway, neighbors I had nodded to for years but never really known. Now, we were intimate in our shared devastation. Marisol stood at the front, near a whiteboard. She looked exhausted. Her hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her temples. But her energy was frantic, electric. "They are going to try to sweep this under the rug," Marisol said, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Halden Properties is already issuing statements saying the building was up to code. We know that is a lie." A murmur of agreement went through the room. "My radiator has been leaking for 6 months," a man in a blue windbreaker said. "I put in 5 requests. They just painted over the water damage." The back stairwell door. A young woman named Sarah piped up. She was bouncing a sleeping toddler on her knee. "It was locked. The night of the fire. I tried to go out the back way. The push bar wouldn't budge. I had to turn around and run through the smoke to the front." I felt a chill go through me. If the front had been blocked, Sarah and her baby would be dead. "I saw men," an older woman said from the back. Her voice was trembling. "2 nights before the fire. Maintenance men. I thought, but they weren't wearing the uniforms. They were in the basement at 2 a.m. I heard banging on the pipes." Marisol wrote mystery maintenance on the whiteboard in thick black marker. "We need to document everything," Marisol said, capping the marker. "Every unaddressed repair, every strange interaction. We are building a case." "What about Donald?" someone asked. The room went quiet. I looked around. "Who is Donald?" I asked. Marisol looked at me. "Donald Rusk. He lived in 404, directly above you." "The older man with the cane?" I asked. I remembered him. He was quiet, always wore a flat cap. "Yeah," Marisol said. "Donald was a retired contractor. He knew building codes inside and out. For the last year, he had been taking photos, cracks in the foundation, exposed wiring in the laundry room, the lack of fire extinguishers. He had a binder full of evidence." "Where is he?" I asked, looking around the circle. "He moved out," Marisol said grimly. 2 weeks ago. Broke his lease, left his security deposit, and just vanished. Told me he was going to stay with his sister in Ohio, but he looked scared. Willow, he told me he was done fighting." I stared at the scuffed linoleum floor. The man who had the evidence had fled 2 weeks before the building burned down. It was too convenient. "Did he take the binder?" I asked. "I don't know," Marisol said. "But if he didn't, it burned with everything else." The meeting ended late. I walked back to the motel in the freezing drizzle, my mind racing. When I got to my room, the silence was suffocating. The reality of my situation. No home, no job, dwindling money, pressed down on me like a physical weight. I needed a lifeline. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed my parents' number again. My father answered this time. "Willow," he said. His voice was guarded. "We were just talking about you." "Dad?" I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I went to the city assistance desk. They said the report will take weeks. I can't stay in this motel that long. I don't have the money." "Did you call the insurance company?" "Yes, they are processing it, but without a police report or a fire marshal's report, they can't release the main funds. They gave me a small emergency stipend, but it's barely enough for food and a week of lodging." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I need to come stay with you, just for a month. Until the insurance comes through, I can sleep on the couch. I can help with the house." There was a silence on the line. It wasn't the silence of consideration. It was the silence of resistance. "The guest room isn't available," he said finally. "I don't need the guest room," I pleaded. "I'll sleep on the floor in the den. Dad, I'm scared. I'm alone here." "Willow," my mother's voice came on the line from the extension. She sounded breathless, agitated. You can't come here right now. It's just not a good time. Your father is dealing with high blood pressure. Stress is very bad for him. I'm your daughter, I said, my voice rising. My apartment burned down. I am homeless. And you're worried about blood pressure? Lower your voice, my father snapped. See? This is exactly what we mean. You bring chaos. Willow, you always have. I didn't set the fire. Dad. You chose to live in that city, my mother said, her voice trembling. You chose that building. We told you to stay closer to home. You wanted your independence. Now you have to live with the consequences of your choices. You need to stop blaming others and look forward. Blaming others? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm asking for a roof over my head. We can send you some money, my father said, his tone final. We can wire you $500. That should help you get settled. I don't want your money, I said, tears stinging my eyes. I want my parents. We are doing what we think is best, my mother whispered. Please, Willow, don't push this. They hung up. I stared at the phone, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. They were terrified. I could hear it in the tremor of my mother's voice, the rigid defensiveness of my father's. They weren't just being cold. They were being defensive. But why? The next day, I went to a donation center set up in the cafeteria of a local elementary school. The tables were piled high with clothes, toiletries, and household goods donated by the community. It was a humiliating exercise. I had always been the one donating. I was the one who dropped off bags of gently used clothes at the Goodwill. Now, I was the scavenger. I sifted through a pile of sweaters, the smell of mothballs rising in the air. I found a heavy wool cardigan that looked warm. I grabbed a pack of socks. I stood in line to get a bottle of generic shampoo and a toothbrush. As I reached for a phone charger in a bin of tangled wires, my hand brushed against another woman's. Sorry, I mumbled, pulling back. It was Jessa Lorne. She lived on the second floor. She was a quiet woman, a librarian who kept to herself. She looked pale, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected to be scolded. Willow, she whispered. Hi, Jessa, you okay? She moved closer to me, pretending to inspect a pair of boots. I heard you at the meeting last night. I didn't speak up. I was too scared. Scared of what? The smell, she said, her voice barely audible over the chatter of the room. The night of the fire, I was in the stairwell early. I heard the noise and I looked out. What did you smell? Everyone keeps saying it was electrical, Jessa said, looking over her shoulder. But I know what an electrical fire smells like. My toaster shorted out once. It smells like ozone and sharp burning plastic. And this? This smelled sweet, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. Sickly sweet, and chemical, like the stuff my brother used to use to strip paint off cars, or high-grade fuel. My stomach turned over. Accelerant? I don't know the word, Jessa said, clutching a scarf to her chest. But it wasn't wire, and it was coming from the basement. I saw smoke coming up the stairs before I saw it anywhere else. The fire didn't start in the walls. Willow, it started underneath us. Before I could ask anything else, a volunteer walked over to ask if we needed bags. Jessa flinched, gave me a terrified look, and hurried away toward the exit. I needed my file. I left the donation center and walked 2 miles to the property management office of Halden Properties. It was located in a sleek, glass-fronted building downtown, a world away from the crumbling brick tenement I had lived in. I walked into the lobby. The air conditioning was cold. The receptionist was young, wearing a headset, typing furiously. "Can I help you?" she asked, not stopping her typing. "I'm Willow Bryant. I was a tenant at the building on 4th Street, the one that burned." She stopped typing. "Oh, yes. I need a copy of my tenant file," I said. "My lease agreement, my maintenance records, and my payment history. I need them for my insurance claim." She looked at her screen, clicked a few times, and then frowned. "I'm sorry, Ms. Bryant, we can't access those files right now." "Why not?" "They're digital." "Well, Yes and no. The physical files for that building were damaged. Damaged how? I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. The office is here. The fire was 3 miles away. We keep the physical archives in the basement of the 4th Street building. She lied. She did it smoothly. But it was a lie. I knew it. I had seen the file cabinets behind the desk in this office when I signed my lease 3 years ago. Okay, I said, playing along. But the digital records? The server is currently undergoing reconstruction due to the data corruption associated with the incident, she said. It was word salad, meaningless corporate jargon designed to stonewall. You're telling me, I said, my voice hard, that a fire in a residential building corrupted a server in a downtown office tower? She gave me a thin, pitying smile. Technology is complex, Ms. Bryant. We are working on it. We will notify you when the files are available. I want to speak to Brent Halden. Mr. Halden is in meetings all day. I'll wait. You can't wait here, she said, her tone sharpening. This is a private office. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. I looked at her. She was just a gatekeeper, doing what she was told, but the wall she was protecting was hiding something massive. Don't bother, I said. I'm leaving. I needed money. The aid pamphlet the city rep had given me listed an emergency grant program for victims of natural disasters and fires. I had borrowed Marisol's car, a rusted Toyota Corolla that smelled of vanilla air freshener and dog, to drive to the county assistance office, which was 20 miles out in the suburbs. It was a risk. If I got pulled over without a license, I was screwed. But I had no choice. The bus would have taken 3 hours. I sat across from a caseworker named Mr. Henderson. He was a heavy-set man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Okay, Ms. Bryant, he said, shuffling through the forms I had filled out. This looks mostly in order. You are requesting the Tier 1 Emergency Housing Grant, $1,200. Yes, I said. Please. I just need to verify your residency and income, he said. Do you have your last 2 pay stubs and a utility bill in your name at that address? I stared at him. Sir, my apartment burned down. My laptop is melted. My filing cabinet is ash. I don't have pay stubs. You can print them from your employer's portal, he suggested. I don't have a computer, I said, my voice rising, and I can't access the portal without my badge, which also burned. Okay, he said, unbothered. What about the utility bill? I receive paper bills. They were on my kitchen counter, which, again, is now a pile of rubble. He sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. Ms. Bryant, I sympathize. I really do. But I cannot release state funds without proof of residency and economic hardship. It's the law. If I give you the money without the documentation, I lose my job. But the documentation burned, I cried, slamming my hand on the desk. That is the point. I am applying for aid because I lost everything. And you're telling me I can't have the aid because I lost everything? It's a technicality, he said, putting his glasses back on. If you can get a notarized letter from your landlord confirming your residency and rent amount, that would suffice. My landlord? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. My landlord is currently claiming his files are being reconstructed. He won't give me anything. Then I'm afraid your application is incomplete, he said, stamping the form with a red pending stamp. Once you gather the materials, you can resubmit. I walked out of the office, the fluorescent lights buzzing over my head. I got into Marisol's car, slammed the door, and locked it. I gripped the steering wheel. I looked at the dashboard, at the little hula girl bobblehead Marisol had glued there. The absurdity of it crushed me. It was a loop, a perfect, closed loop of bureaucracy designed to keep people like me from getting up. You need money to get ID. You need ID to get money. You need a phone to get a job. You need a job to get a phone. I put my forehead against the steering wheel and sobbed. I cried until my chest hurt, until I couldn't breathe. I cried for my grandmother's locket. I cried for my parents' betrayal. I cried because I was 32 years old and I had to beg a stranger for permission to survive. And he had said no. By the time I drove back to the city, the sun had set. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, creating streaks of neon light. I needed to return the car to Marisol. But first, I needed coffee. I needed something warm in my hands to stop the shaking. I parked a block away from the property office. There was a coffee shop across the street called The Grind. It had big plate glass windows. I walked toward it, huddled in my donated wool cardigan. As I approached the window, I stopped. Sitting at a table near the glass was Brent Halden. He wasn't wearing his trench coat. He was in a navy suit, looking relaxed, holding a ceramic cup. Sitting across from him was a man I didn't recognize. The man was older, with silver hair and a suit that looked sharper. More expensive than Halden's. He had the posture of someone who owned the chair he was sitting in. I stepped into the shadows of a doorway, watching. Halden was laughing. His head was thrown back, his teeth flashing. It was a laugh of relief, of camaraderie. The silver-haired man wasn't laughing. He was smiling, a small, tight smile. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the table. It wasn't a thick folder. It was thin, maybe 10 pages. Halden stopped laughing. He placed his hand on the folder. He didn't open it. He just rested his hand on it, nodding. It looked like a transaction, a handover. I stepped out of the doorway. I didn't know what I was doing. I was fueled by exhaustion and a cold, hard rage that had been solidifying in my gut all day. I walked past the window. I didn't hurry. I walked slowly, turning my head to look directly through the glass. Halden looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, he looked confused. Then, recognition dawned. His smile froze. It didn't fade. It just stopped moving, turning into a rictus of panic. He looked from me to the man across from him, then back to me. His hand twitched on the folder. He knew I was watching, and he was calculating exactly how much I had seen. I held his gaze for 3 seconds, long enough to let him know I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. Then I turned and walked away into the night. The image of his frozen smile burned into my mind like a brand. I didn't have my files. I didn't have my money. But I had something else now. I had his fear. 2 days after I watched Brent Halden laugh in the coffee shop, my phone rang. I was sitting on the floor of my motel room, surrounded by a chaotic spread of papers I had printed at the public library. I was trying to reconstruct my life from memory, listing every piece of furniture, every book, every kitchen utensil I had lost, assigning them arbitrary values for an insurance claim I wasn't sure would ever be paid. The number on the screen was local, but not saved in my contacts. I answered it, expecting another bill collector or a robotic voice telling me my car warranty had expired. Willow Bryant? The voice was male, deep, and possessed a calm that felt almost medical. It wasn't the harried tone of the city bureaucrats or the dismissive snap of my father. It was the voice of someone who took his time. Yes, I said, wary. Who is this? My name is Elias Crown. I am a fire investigator working with the city's arson task force. I'm reviewing the file for the incident at 412 West 4th Street. I sat up straighter, my back pressing against the cheap wood veneer of the nightstand. They told me it was electrical, I said. The woman at the assistant's desk said it was likely old wiring. Did she? Crown asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was a note-taking sound. Bureaucracy prefers simple answers. Ms. Bryant, old wiring is a very tidy box to put a tragedy in. I prefer to look at the soot patterns. What do the soot patterns say? They say that fire has a personality, he replied. And the fire in your building was aggressive. It moved with a speed that does not typically align with a resistance heating failure inside a wall void. I would like to take a formal statement from you, if you are willing. I am willing, I said immediately. I want to know what happened. Good. I'm currently cross-referencing the tenant complaints with the maintenance logs provided by Halden Properties. However, I have found some discrepancies. I was hoping you might have your own records. I felt a surge of adrenaline, sharp and electric. I do. I have emails. I have screenshots of the maintenance portal. I saved them to a cloud drive years ago, and I accessed them at the library yesterday. Excellent, Crown said. Specifically, I am looking for anything related to the electrical systems, or access to the basement levels. I have an email from 3 weeks ago about a sparking outlet, I said, my voice gaining strength. They marked it resolved without ever coming to my apartment. I also have a photo I took of the fuse box in the hallway when it was buzzing. It's time-stamped. Can you send those to me, right now? Yes. He gave me an email address. I switched apps on my phone, my thumbs flying across the cracked screen. I attached the files, the resolved notification, the photo of the rusted fuse box, the email thread where I begged for a technician. I hit send. Sent, I said. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the clicking of a mouse. I have them, Crown said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming even more precise. Ms. Bryant, look at the timestamp on your resolved ticket. November 14th at 2 p.m. I see it. According to the official log Halden Properties submitted to my office this morning. The maintenance technician was at a hardware store in the next county at 2 p.m. on November 14th. He physically could not have closed this ticket. They lied, I said. It wasn't a question. It suggests the maintenance log is not a record of work done, but a record of liability avoided, Crown said. I am expanding the scope of my inquiry. This is no longer just a safety inspection. Ms. Bryant, I am treating this as a potential crime scene. The words hung in the air. Crime scene. You think someone said it? I asked, my throat tight. I think fire needs 3 things: heat, fuel, and oxygen, Crown said. Based on the burn velocity in the stairwell, I suspect the fuel component was introduced artificially. I will be in touch. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been a weapon. And if it was a weapon, then someone had pulled the trigger. I called Marisol. We need to talk to everyone, I told her, skipping the pleasantries. The investigator. Crown. He thinks it wasn't an accident. We need to find out who was in the building that day. Marisol didn't hesitate. I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. Bring a notebook. We spent the afternoon crisscrossing the neighborhood, tracking down displaced tenants who were staying with friends or in cheaper motels on the Strip. It was grueling work. People were tired, scared, and suspicious. But Marisol had a way with them, a fierce, protective anger that made them want to talk. We found Mr. Henderson, the man from 2B, sitting on his sister's front porch 3 blocks away. He was staring blankly at the street, a can of soda in his hand. Mr. Henderson? Marisol said gently. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Marisol, Willow, you guys okay? We're surviving, I said. We're trying to figure out what happened. Did you see anything weird the day of the fire? Tuesday? He frowned, thinking. Tuesday. I was homesick with the flu. I was on the couch all day. Did you hear anything? I asked. In the hallway? Not in the hall, he said. But the basement door is right under my living room window. I heard the gate squeak. It has that distinct screech, you know? What time? Around 4 in the afternoon, he said. I remember because Judge Judy was just starting on the TV. I looked out the window because I thought maybe it was the delivery guy. I was expecting medicine. Who was it? Marisol asked, her pen hovering over her notebook. It wasn't the regular maintenance guy. Mr. Henderson said. It was a white van. No logo on the side. 2 guys got out. They were wearing those blue coveralls. But they looked clean. Too clean for working men. Did they carry anything? I asked. They carried in 2 heavy boxes, he said. Cardboard boxes, and a couple of those red plastic gas cans. You know, for lawnmowers. My blood ran cold. Gas cans? In November? I didn't think much of it, he shrugged. I thought maybe they were working on the boiler. Does the boiler run on gas? No, Marisol said, her voice shaking slightly. The boiler is electric. It was converted 5 years ago. We thanked him and walked back to the car. The sky was turning a bruised purple, the wind picking up dead leaves and swirling them around our ankles. Gas cans, Marisol whispered, unlocking the car. Willow, they brought in accelerant in broad daylight. We need to find someone who worked for Halden, I said. Someone who knows how they operate. Who is the maintenance guy who supposedly fixed my outlet? Nolan Vicks, Marisol said. He quit 2 months ago, but I know where he hangs out. He drinks at that dive bar on 5th, the Rusty Anchor. Let's go, I said. We didn't find him at the bar, but the bartender told us he was usually sleeping in his truck in the parking lot behind the abandoned textile factory. It took us an hour to find it. A desolate stretch of asphalt surrounded by chain-link fences. A battered Ford pickup was parked in the corner. The windows steamed up. Marisol pulled up alongside it and honked. A man's face appeared in the window, startled and unshaven. He rolled it down as we approached on foot. It was Nolan. I recognized him from the few times he'd come to unclog the drains in the laundry room. He looked older now, worn down by something heavier than fatigue. Marisol? He squinted. What are you doing here? We need to talk. Nolan, Marisol said. About the fire. He flinched. I don't know nothing about no fire. I wasn't there. I quit. We know you quit, I said, stepping forward. We want to know why. He looked at me, then back at Marisol. He rubbed his face with a grease-stained hand. I ain't talking to no cops. We aren't cops, I said. I'm the girl from 304, the one who lost everything, the one who almost burned to death because the alarms didn't go off. He looked at me then, really looked at me. I saw the guilt in his eyes. It was a shallow, nervous thing, swimming just below the surface. I need a cigarette, he muttered. He opened the door and stepped out. He was thin, his work boots held together with duct tape. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Why did you quit, Nolan? I asked again. He exhaled a plume of smoke into the cold air. Because I ain't going to jail for that man. Halden. He's crazy. What did he make you do? Marisol asked. It wasn't what he made me do, Nolan said bitterly. It was what he made me say I did. Every week, he gives me a stack of work orders. Fix the railing on the 4th floor. Check the wiring in 2B. Patch the roof. And he tells me, Nolan, just sign the bottom. Don't worry about doing the work. Just sign it so we're compliant. He made you falsify the maintenance logs? I asked. He said it was just paperwork, Nolan spat. Said the city requires too much documentation and it slows down the real work. But there wasn't no real work being done. He stopped buying parts 6 months ago. Told me to patch leaks with duct tape and paint over mold. My outlet, I said. Did you see the ticket for my outlet? I saw it, Nolan said, looking at his boots. I told him it was dangerous. I told him the wiring in that wall was 90 years old and chewing through insulation. He told me to mark it resolved. He said, Nolan, that building is a money pit. We aren't sinking another dime into it. Why? Marisol asked. Why stop maintaining it? Nolan looked around the empty parking lot, as if expecting Halden to materialize from the shadows. Because of the shadow log, he whispered. The what? The shadow log. Halden kept 2 sets of books for maintenance. The official one, the one I signed, went to the city. But there was another list, a list of units he specifically said to ignore. The units with the legacy tenants, the ones paying rent-controlled prices. I felt a sickening thud in my chest. I was rent-stabilized. Marisol was rent-stabilized. Donald was rent-stabilized. He was trying to drive us out, Marisol said, her voice trembling with rage. By letting the building rot around us. It's worse than that, Nolan said. He was shuffling the property. I heard him on the phone. He was moving the deed around. Different LLCs, shell companies, trying to hide who actually owned it. So when the inevitable happened, nobody could sue the main company. When the fire happened, I said. Nolan didn't answer. He just flicked his cigarette butt onto the wet asphalt and ground it out with his heel. I didn't know he was going to burn it, Nolan said quietly. I just thought he was going to let it fall apart. I swear to God. Ladies, I didn't know. Who owns it now? I asked. Who is the main company? I don't know the name, Nolan said, retreating back to his truck. But I know they ain't local, and they got deep pockets. You too? You should be careful. Halden is just the landlord. The people behind him, they're the money, and money don't like to be embarrassed. He slammed his truck door and turned the key. The engine sputtered to life. We watched him drive away, his taillights fading into the darkness. The next morning, armed with Nolan's information, I went to the public library. I logged onto the bank's website. I had to request a temporary password because my phone was the only verified device I had left. I downloaded my statements for the last 2 years. I started looking at the cashed check images and the electronic transfer recipients. For the first year, my rent had gone to Halden Properties, Inc. Then, 18 months ago, it switched to 4th Street Management, LLC. 6 months later, it was Blue Horizon Ventures. 3 months ago, it became Phoenix Capital Group. Nolan was right. The building was being passed around like a hot potato. Each company was likely a shell, designed to compartmentalize liability. If Phoenix Capital Group had no assets other than the building, and the building was destroyed, there was nothing to sue for. The insurance payout would go to the owners, and the tenants would be left fighting a ghost. I felt a cold, calculated anger rising in me. This wasn't just negligence. This was a complex financial architecture designed to facilitate destruction. I opened my email. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have power, but I had a voice, and I had the truth. I composed a new email to Brent Halden. Subject: Discrepancies in ownership and maintenance records. Mr. Halden, in the process of preparing my insurance claim, I have noticed that my rent payments have been processed by 4 different entities in the last 2 years. I also have confirmation from a former employee that maintenance requests for my unit were deliberately ignored and falsified in a secondary log system. I am copying the fire investigator, Mr. Elias Crown, on this email. I would like a formal explanation of the relationship between Halden Properties and Phoenix Capital Group, and why maintenance was withheld from rent-stabilized units prior to the fire. Willow Bryant. I hit send. My finger trembled on the mouse. I expected silence. I expected to be ignored. I was wrong. 58 minutes later, my phone pinged. It was an email, not from Halden, but from a law firm. Garrison, Tate Associates. Cease and desist, and notice of defamation, Ms. Bryant. We represent Mr. Brent Halden and Halden Properties. We are in receipt of your communication dated today. Your allegations regarding falsified logs and deliberately ignored maintenance are patently false, malicious, and constitute libel per se. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist from making further defamatory statements to third parties, including but not limited to city officials and other tenants. Be advised that any further dissemination of these baseless conspiracy theories will result in immediate legal action against you for damages to our client's reputation. Furthermore, you are reminded that your lease agreement contained a confidentiality clause regarding internal building management disputes. You are in breach. Govern yourself accordingly. Arthur Vane, Esquire. I stared at the screen. The threat was visceral. They were trying to bully me into silence. They were scared. You don't send a letter like that within an hour unless you are terrified of what the person knows. But it was the name at the bottom that made me pause. Arthur Vane. The name scratched at something in the back of my mind. Not recent memory, old memory, childhood memory. I closed the laptop and walked out of the library. I needed air. I walked to a payphone. I didn't trust my cell phone anymore, and dialed my parents' house. I didn't know why. Maybe I was a glutton for punishment. Maybe I just needed to hear a voice that had known me before I was a liability. My mother answered. Hello? Mom, it's me. Willow, she sighed. We talked about this. We can't. I'm not asking for money. I cut her off. I just found something out. The building. Mom. It was a setup. They were shuffling the ownership to hide it. They let it burn. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Mom? Willow, please, she whispered. Her voice sounded strained, like she was holding back tears. Stop digging. Just take the insurance money when it comes and move on. Go to a new city. Start over. Why? I asked. Why are you so desperate for me to run away? Because you don't understand how the world works, she snapped, her fear turning to anger. You think you're fighting a landlord? You're fighting people who crush people like us for sport. Just stop. For your father's sake, stop. For Dad's sake? I frowned. What does Dad have to do with this? I have to go, she said. Don't call this number again for a few days. Please. She hung up. I stood on the corner, the receiver humming in my hand. For your father's sake. The silence from my parents wasn't just disappointment, it was protection. But who were they protecting? Me or themselves? I went back to the motel. I couldn't sleep. The name Arthur Vane kept looping in my head. And the company name, Phoenix Capital Group, it was 2 a.m. I pulled out my phone. The screen was small. But it was enough. I went to the County Recorder of Deeds website. It was a clunky, public government database. I searched for the property address, 412 West 4th Street. The history loaded slowly. Owner, Halden Properties, 2015 to 2024. Transfer, November 10th, 2025. 3 days before the fire. New owner, Obsidian Holdings, LLC. I clicked on the details for Obsidian Holdings, LLC. It was registered in Delaware, but the filing address was local. I scrolled down to the signature block on the deed transfer. The transfer was signed by the managing partner of Obsidian Holdings. It wasn't Brent Halden. Halden was just the seller. The buyer's signature was a scrawl, but the printed name below it was clear. Marcus Bryant. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. The motel room seemed to spin. Marcus Bryant. My father? I read it again, and again. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Marcus Bryant. My father had purchased the building 3 days before it burned down. No, that couldn't be right. My father was a retired accountant in the suburbs. He didn't buy apartment buildings in the city. He complained about the price of gas. He didn't have millions of dollars, unless he wasn't the buyer, unless he was just another name on a paper, another shell. I looked at the notary stamp on the document. Commission expires, 2028. Notary, Arthur Vane, the lawyer, the man who had just threatened to sue me, and then the memory clicked. I was 12 years old. My father was having a backyard barbecue. There were men in suits, drinking scotch in plastic cups, laughing too loudly. My father was standing by the grill, looking nervous, eager to please. And there was a man with a silver watch and a booming laugh, clapping my father on the back. "Mark, you worry too much," the man had said. "It's just paper. We put your name on it. We take the risk. You get the cut. It's how business is done." That man was Arthur Vane. I stared at the phone screen, the blue light illuminating the horror on my face. My parents hadn't refused to help me because they were tough-loving me into adulthood. They hadn't refused to let me come home because the guest room was full. They had refused because my father owned the building that had just incinerated my life. He was the new owner. He was the one the insurance policy would pay out to. The fire wasn't just arson, it was insurance fraud. And my father, my quiet, critical, distant father, was the face of it. I felt a scream building in my chest, a raw, primal thing that wanted to tear the room apart. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle it, rocking back and forth on the bed. "Not our problem," they had said. It wasn't their problem. It was their crime. And I was the only witness who could burn them down. The drive to my parents' house was a 2-hour fugue state of highway gray and bare winter trees. I had rented the cheapest car available, a compact that rattled when it went over 50 miles per hour, using the last sliver of available credit on a card I knew I couldn't pay off. I had the printout of the deed transfer in my bag. folded into a tight square. Marcus Bryant. The name burned against my hip like a hot coal. I parked in the driveway of the house I grew up in. It was a pristine, two-story colonial with black shutters and a manicured lawn that looked defiant against the winter frost. It looked like safety. It looked like the kind of place where bad things were not allowed to happen. I walked up the path, my legs feeling heavy. I didn't knock. I used the key I still kept on my keychain, the only key I had left. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and silence. "Mom? Dad?" My mother was in the kitchen. She was standing at the granite island, wiping it down with a microfiber cloth. The counter was already gleaming. There wasn't a crumb or a streak on it, but she was scrubbing a specific spot with a manic intensity, her arm moving in tight, jerky circles. "Willow," she said, not looking up. "You didn't say you were coming." "I needed to see you," I said. I stood in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in my own history. "Where is Dad?" "In the den," she said, still scrubbing. "He is watching the news. He doesn't want to be disturbed." I walked past her, through the hallway, and into the den. My father was sitting in his leather recliner, a newspaper spread across his lap, though his eyes were fixed on the television screen. The volume was muted. "Dad," I said. He didn't turn. He stared at the silent talking heads on the screen. "I told you on the phone. Willow, we can't help you with money right now." "I'm not here for money," I said. I walked around the chair so I was standing between him and the TV. I forced him to look at me. His eyes were tired, rimmed with a redness that matched my own. But there was a hardness there, a wall I had never noticed before. "Then why are you here?" he asked. "Because I met someone," I said. "A man named Elias Crown." The reaction was subtle, but because I was looking for it, it screamed at me. My father's shoulders seized up, his hand, resting on the arm of the chair, clenched into a fist for a fraction of a second before relaxing. It was the involuntary flinch of a man who hears a sound he has been dreading. "I don't know who that is," he said. His voice was too level, too controlled. "He is a fire investigator," I said, watching him closely. "He works for the city. He thinks the fire wasn't an accident. He thinks it was arson." My father picked up the remote and turned the TV off. The screen went black, reflecting our distorted ghosts. "Arson is a serious word," he said. "You shouldn't go throwing it around. It sounds hysterical." "He found discrepancies in the maintenance logs," I said. "He knows about the shadow logs. He knows the building was being neglected on purpose." My mother walked into the room. She was twisting the microfiber cloth in her hands, wringing it out as if it were wet, though it was dry. "Willow, please," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let the insurance handle it?" "Because the insurance is a lie, isn't it?" I turned to her. I looked up the records. "Mom, I know Halden Properties sold the building 3 days before the fire." My father stood up. It was a sudden, violent movement that made my mother flinch. "That is business," he snapped. "Real estate changes hands every day. It has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I almost died in that building. I lost everything I own. And you're standing here, in this house, acting like it's an accounting error." I took a step closer to him. "Do you know anything about Halden Properties? Do you know the people involved? Do you know a company called Obsidian Holdings?" I was testing him. I wanted to see if he would lie to my face about the name on the deed. He looked at me, his jaw working. He didn't answer. He turned his back to me and walked toward the window, looking out at the gray street. "We don't get involved in your messes, Willow," my mother said. She was standing behind me. I turned to look at her. She was pale, her eyes wide and terrified. "My messes?" I asked, incredulous. "You think I caused this?" "I mean your life," she stammered. "Your complications. We have worked very hard to have a peaceful life. We don't—" We don't get involved." Her voice shook on the word involved. It wasn't a statement of indifference. It was a statement of fear. She wasn't saying we don't care. She was saying we can't afford to be implicated. "You're already involved," I said quietly. "I just don't know how deep yet." My father spoke to the window. "Go home, Willow." "I don't have a home," I said. "Remember?" "Leave," he said. "Now." I looked at them. Two people I had known my entire life, who had raised me, fed me, sent me to school, and suddenly, they were strangers. They were conspirators. I turned and walked out of the house. I didn't say goodbye. I drove aimlessly for a while, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The encounter had left me feeling hollowed out, scraped clean of any lingering childhood illusion that my parents were safe harbor. I was on the bypass, heading back toward the city, when I noticed the car. It was a gray sedan, a nondescript model, maybe 5 years old. It was 2 car lengths behind me in the right lane. I wouldn't have noticed it, except that it had been there since I merged onto the highway near my parents' exit. I watched it in the rearview mirror. I signaled left and changed lanes. The gray sedan signaled left and changed lanes. I sped up, pushing the rattling compact to 70. The gray sedan sped up, maintaining the exact same distance. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "You're being paranoid," I told myself. "It's a coincidence. Everyone drives gray sedans." I needed to know. I saw an exit for a shopping plaza coming up. I waited until the last possible second, then jerked the wheel to the right, cutting across the gore point and taking the exit ramp. The gray sedan swerved. It followed me off the highway. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I pulled into the parking lot of a large grocery store. It was Saturday afternoon, and the lot was packed with shoppers. I drove down a crowded aisle, weaving between carts and pedestrians. The gray sedan was still there, 3 cars back. I pulled into a spot near the entrance, surrounded by people. I didn't turn off the engine. I watched the mirror. The gray sedan drove slowly past my row. It didn't park. It cruised by. The windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see the driver, only a vague silhouette. It slowed down just as it passed the rear of my car, lingering for a heartbeat, and then accelerated toward the exit of the lot. It was a message. "We see you. We know where you are." I sat in the idling car, gripping the wheel until my fingers ached. I wasn't just fighting a landlord anymore. I wasn't just fighting my parents. I was fighting something that had eyes on the road. My phone buzzed. It was Elias Crown. I answered it, putting it on speaker so I could keep my eyes on the parking lot. "Willow," Crown said. His voice was a steady anchor in the spinning world. "I have an update from the lab." "Tell me," I said. "They found traces of a petroleum-based accelerant in the debris from the basement hallway," he said. "Specifically, near the base of the stairwell doors. It confirms the theory. The fire was set to block the exits." I closed my eyes. So they wanted us trapped? Or they wanted to ensure total destruction of the structure, Crown said. "If the fire moves up the stairwell, it acts like a chimney. It spreads faster than the sprinklers can manage." Speaking of sprinklers, I pulled the maintenance history on the suppression system. "Let me guess," I said. "It was broken." "It wasn't broken," Crown corrected. "It was disabled. The main valve was shut off manually. The logs show a system test was initiated at 4 p.m. on the day of the fire. The valve was never reopened." 4 p.m., I whispered. "That's when the neighbor saw the men with the gas cans." "Exactly. This was a coordinated demolition. Ms. Bryant, I am preparing to hand this over to the district attorney, but I need to build the connection to the ownership. The shell companies are designed to be opaque." "I found something," I said. I hesitated. "I found the name on the deed transfer. The new owner." "Who is it?" I couldn't say it. Not yet. If I told Crown it was my father, I would be the one handing the match to the prosecutor. I would be the one sending my father to prison. Even after everything, even after the coldness in the den, The biological imperative to protect him choked me. I'm still verifying it, I lied. I'll let you know when I'm sure. Be careful, Willow, Crown said, his tone shifting. If you are getting close to the money, you are getting close to the danger. These people are not amateurs. I know, I said, looking at the exit where the gray sedan had disappeared. I think they're following me. Go to a public place, Crown said sharply. Stay in the light. Do not go back to the motel tonight if you can avoid it. I'll be okay, I said, and hung up. I didn't go back to the motel immediately. I met Marisol at a 24-hour diner near the university. It was bright, loud, and smelled of grease and coffee, the safest place I could think of. Marisol was sitting in a booth, surrounded by papers. She looked triumphant and sick at the same time. Look at this, she said as I slid into the seat opposite her. She pushed a printout across the Formica table. It was a public notice from a trade journal called Insurance Daily. I was digging through Halden's business filings, Marisol said. Look at the date, October 25th. I read the highlighted text. Halden Properties secures umbrella coverage adjustment for portfolio assets, including 412 West 4th Street. Total insured value increased by 200%. 200%, I said, feeling the nausea rise in my throat. They doubled the insurance policy 3 weeks before the fire. They bet against their own building, Marisol said. They knew it was going to burn. They wanted to maximize the payout. It's classic fraud. Willow, buy a dump, insure it for a palace, strike a match. And the tenants are just collateral damage, I said. Just bugs in the walls. We have them, Marisol said. This proves intent. With what Crown found, we can nail them. I nodded, but my stomach was twisting. We didn't have them. I had them, because I knew whose signature was on the other end of that insurance payout. The next morning, the other shoe dropped. I was sitting in the motel room, trying to figure out where to go since Crown had warned me about staying there. When my phone rang, it was HR, my company. Willow? It was Linda, the HR director. Her voice was stiff, formal. Do you have a minute? Yes, Linda. Did you get my email about the laptop? We did, she said. Actually, that is what I'm calling about. We've been reviewing your situation, and, well, there have been some concerns raised. Concerns? About your stability, Linda said. We understand you are going through a traumatic event, but we have received reports of ongoing drama, erratic behavior. We have a duty to maintain a safe and focused work environment for all employees. Erratic behavior? I almost laughed. Linda, my apartment burned down. I'm not erratic. I'm homeless. I'm trying to get back to work. We also received a call, Linda said, her voice dropping lower. An anonymous tip, really, suggesting that you have a pattern of conflict and that you are planning legal action that might reflect poorly on the company. What? That's insane. Who called you? I can't disclose that, but given the circumstances, and the fact that you currently cannot perform your duties without equipment, we are placing you on administrative leave pending a full review of your employment status. Is it paid leave? I asked, my voice small. No, Linda said. It is unpaid until the investigation is complete. You're firing me, I said. You're just doing it slowly. It's standard procedure. Willow, take care of yourself. The line clicked. I sat there, stunned. Unpaid leave, no income, no job. A text message popped up on my screen. It was from Priya Sutter, a girl I sat next to in the office. We shared cat memes and complained about the coffee. Priya. Hey, are you okay? I heard Linda talking. Someone called the main line yesterday. A guy, he sounded super professional, said he was a concerned former landlord. He told them you were unstable, that you trashed your apartment and threatened to sue everyone. He said you were a liability. I stared at the text. A concerned former landlord. Halden or Vane. They weren't just burning my past. They were burning my future. They were systematically dismantling my credibility, cutting off my income. isolating me so that when I finally stood up to accuse them, I would look like a desperate, crazy, unemployed woman with a vendetta. It was surgical. It was brutal. I felt the walls of the motel room closing in. I was trapped. I had no money, no home, no job, and parents who were complicit in my destruction. I lay back on the bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I felt a deep, crushing exhaustion. I wanted to give up. I wanted to sign Halden's settlement papers and disappear. I scrolled through my phone, looking for something, anything, to ground me. I saw the voicemail icon. There was one saved message. It was from the morning after the fire. I had been so shell-shocked at the shelter that I had never listened to it. I had assumed it was just my mother checking in before I called her. I pressed play. "Willow?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. There was a static hiss in the background, like she was calling from a bathroom with the fan on, or a closet. "Willow, She paused. I heard a sharp intake of breath. "I can't talk long. Your father is... He's in the other room with Mr. Vane." My blood froze. Vane had been at my parents' house the morning after the fire. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," my mother whispered. She sounded terrified. "We didn't know it would happen like this. He promised it would be empty. He promised no one would get hurt." She was crying now. Soft, muffled sobs. "Please, Willow, if they offer you money, take it. Don't ask questions. Don't fight them. They are not the people we used to know. Please, don't push this. It's too late for us. Save yourself." The message ended. I lowered the phone. He promised it would be empty. My father knew. He knew the fire was coming. He thought the building would be empty. Maybe he thought Halden had cleared the tenants out? But he knew, and he had let it happen. The realization didn't break me. It calcified me. My mother wasn't just a cold woman wiping a counter. She was a hostage. She was warning me from inside a locked room. And my father? My father wasn't just an investor. He was the man who had sold my life for an insurance payout, convinced by men in suits that it was just business. I sat up on the bed. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had taken my home. They had taken my job. They had tried to take my sanity. But they had made a mistake. They had left me with the voicemail. I wasn't going to save myself. I was going to burn them down. The office of the Fire Investigations Unit was located in the basement of the municipal courthouse, a place that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. There were no windows, only fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. Elias Crown sat behind a metal desk that was almost completely submerged under stacks of files. When I walked in, he didn't offer a pleasantry. He simply pointed to the chair opposite him. "Sit," he said. I sat. My hands were gripping the strap of my bag, where I kept the printout of the deed transfer, the paper that proved my father owned the building. I hadn't shown it to Crown yet. I told myself it was because I needed to be sure, but deep down, I knew it was cowardice. I was still protecting them. "We recovered the hard drive from the security system," Crown said, tapping a key on his laptop. "It was badly damaged by heat and water, but the lab managed to pull a few fragments from the cache. I want you to look at this." He turned the monitor toward me. The video was grainy. A black and white feed from the camera mounted above the rear entrance. The one I had noticed was angled away. "This is time-stamped 3:14 on the night of the fire," Crown said. I leaned in. The image showed the alleyway. It was dark, but I could see the brick wall the camera was now pointing at. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a shadow moved across the frame. It was a person, dressed in dark clothing, moving quickly. They stepped out of the frame, toward the door. "Watch the time," Crown said. At 3:14 and 12 seconds, a small green light flashed on the edge of the frame, the reflection of the keypad status light on the wet pavement. "The door opened," Crown said, "without force." "They had a key?" I asked. "Better," Crown said. They had a code, but not a tenant code. We checked the logs against the keypad's internal memory, which surprisingly survived. The code entered was a 6-digit sequence used for system overrides, a master code. Only the property manager and the owner would have access to it. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. The owner, my father. 3:14, I whispered. Does that time mean something to you? I was awake, I said, the memory washing over me like ice water. I woke up coughing. I thought it was just dry air. I got up to get a glass of water. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy steps, not like a neighbor walking to the bathroom. It sounded like someone running in boots. The first alarm didn't trigger until 3:20, Crown said. That gives us a 6-minute window. Whoever entered at 3:14 was inside your building for 6 minutes before the sensors picked up the smoke. That is a lifetime for an arsonist. They weren't just setting a fire, Willow. They were spreading it. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Do you know anyone who would have that code? Willow? I swallowed hard. The paper in my bag felt heavy. No, I lied. Just Halden, or his maintenance crew. Crown studied me for a second, then nodded slowly. He didn't believe me, but he wasn't going to press, not yet. The next day, Marisol called me. Her voice was breathless. We found him, she said. Who? Donald Rusk, the guy from 4B, the one with the photos. I sat up on the edge of the motel bed. Where is he? His sister's place in Ohio. I used one of those people finder websites. It cost me $20, but I got an address. We sent a letter, remember? Did he reply? He just called me, Marisol said. From a blocked number. He sounds terrified. Willow, he didn't want to talk, but I told him about the accelerant. I told him we knew about the gas cans. What did he say? He said to meet him on the secure line. He gave me a number to call back in 10 minutes. I'm picking you up. We're doing this together. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in Marisol's car in the parking lot of a laundromat, the phone resting on the dashboard between us on speaker. We dialed the number. It rang once. Hello? The voice was raspy, older. It sounded like Donald, but stripped of the warmth I remembered. Donald, it's Marisol, she said. I have Willow Bryant with me. The girl from downstairs, he said. I remember. You were quiet. Donald, why did you leave? I asked. You were collecting evidence. You were fighting them, and then you just vanished. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the static of the connection, the faint sound of a television in the background. They came to my door, Donald said finally. 2 men, not Halden. These were suits, lawyers, maybe, or fixers. When? 2 weeks before the fire. They knew about the binder. They knew I was taking pictures of the code violations. They sat on my couch and told me that the building was going to be undergoing major structural renovations and that it would be unsafe for me to stay. Renovations, I repeated bitterly. They offered me $10,000, Donald said. Cash, in an envelope. They said it was a relocation assistance package. They said if I took it, I had to be out in 48 hours, and I had to leave the binder behind. Did you take it? Marisol asked gently. I'm 70 years old, Donald said, his voice cracking. I have a bad hip. I have no savings. $10,000 is more money than I've seen in a decade. Yes, I took it. I didn't judge him. I couldn't. But I didn't leave the binder, he added. I left a binder. I put some old newspapers in it. I took the real photos with me. My heart leaped. You still have them? I have the digital files, he said. My nephew scanned them for me. There is one photo. Willow, you need to hear this. I went down to the basement a month ago because I smelled fumes. I found a storage locker that was supposed to be empty. It was full of canisters. Gas cans? I asked. No, industrial cleaning solvent. Or that's what the label said. Acetone. But they were stacked against the wooden support beams, right under the stairwell, and the caps were loose. I took a picture. Why didn't you go to the police? Because one of the men, Donald whispered, the one in the suit, as he was leaving. He looked at my cane. He said, Mr. Rusk, accidents happen in old buildings. Stairs are dangerous. You don't want to be brave in a building like this. Bravery breaks bones. A chill went through the car. It was the same veiled threat my mother had given me. Don't push this. Donald, can you send us that photo? I asked. I'll email it, he said. But then I'm changing my number. I can't be part of this. They know where my sister lives. Thank you. Donald, I said. You're brave enough. The line went dead. That evening, I was sitting in the motel room, staring at the photo Donald had sent. It was blurry, taken in low light, but clear enough. 5-gallon drums, silver metal, stacked like dominoes against the dry. Aging timber of the basement ceiling, acetone, highly flammable. If that caught, it would burn hot and fast. It would eat the wood. It would turn the stairwell into a chimney. My phone pinged with a new email notification. Subject: settlement offer, without prejudice. From legal@haldenproperties.com. I opened it. Dear Ms. Bryant, we at Halden Properties are deeply saddened by the tragic events of last week. While the official investigation is still pending, we understand that our valued tenants are facing immediate financial hardship as a gesture of goodwill and without admission of any liability. Ownership has authorized a one-time hardship settlement for displaced residents. Attached, please find a settlement and release agreement. Upon execution, you will receive a wire transfer in the amount of $25,000. Please note, this agreement includes a standard confidentiality clause regarding the settlement and any prior tenancy disputes. This offer expires in 48 hours. I stared at the number. $25,000. It was a fortune to me right now. It was enough to pay off my credit card, enough to get a new apartment, buy a new laptop, buy clothes that didn't smell like a donation bin. It was a restart button. All I had to do was sign. All I had to do was agree to never speak about the fire again, to never tell anyone about the flickering outlets, the shadow logs, or the master code. For a moment, a long, shameful moment, I considered it. I imagined the relief of seeing that money in my bank account. I imagined walking away. But then I looked at the photo of the acetone drums again. I thought about Donald Rusk being threatened in his own living room. I thought about my mother's terrified whisper. If I signed this, I wasn't just taking money. I was taking a bribe. I was selling my silence to the people who had tried to kill me. I printed the email. I got in the car and drove back to the courthouse. Crown was still there, even though it was past 7. He looked up when I walked in, surprised to see me back so soon. Willow? I slapped the paper onto his desk. They just sent this. Crown picked it up. He read it quickly, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. When he finished, he looked up, and his expression had changed. The clinical detachment was gone, replaced by a sharp, predatory focus. 25,000, he said. That's a high number for a goodwill gesture. It's hush money, I said. It's panic money, Crown corrected. They are trying to cap the liability before the arson ruling becomes public. If you sign this, you release them from all civil claims. Even if we prove arson, you can't sue them. He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge. Do not sign this, Willow. I wasn't going to, I said. But I need you to know something. It's not just Halden. I couldn't hold it back anymore. The settlement offer had been the final straw. It was too slick, too corporate. It smelled of my father's world. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded square of paper, the deed transfer. I unfolded it and placed it on the desk next to the settlement offer. Look at the signature, I said. Crown looked. He saw the name Marcus Bryant. He frowned, confused. Who is Marcus Bryant? My father, I said. My voice didn't shake. He bought the building 3 days before the fire. He owns the shell company, Obsidian Holdings. Crown went very still. He looked from the paper to me, his eyes searching my face for any sign of deception. Your father, he repeated. Yes. Does he know you live there? Of course he knew. He's been telling me to let it go. He refused to let me come home. He told me the guest room was full. Crown let out a long, slow breath. He ran a hand through his hair. This changes everything. Willow, if your father is the owner, and he bought it days before the fire, and then doubled the insurance. He's the mastermind, I said, the words tasting like bile. Or at least, he's the face of it. Crown picked up the deed. I have to bring him in. I have to interview him. But I can't just arrest him on a piece of paper. I need context. I need to know who pulled the strings. I'm going to see him, I said. Tonight, I'm going to confront him with this. I want to hear him say it. Willow, that's dangerous, Crown warned. If he's involved in this deep... He's my father, I said. He won't hurt me, but he might confess. And if he does, Crown said, I need you to remember every word. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Except for the blue glow of the television in the den, I walked to the front door. It was locked. I used my key. I walked straight to the den. My father was there, in his chair, a glass of scotch in his hand. My mother was sitting on the sofa, knitting something that looked like a gray shroud. She stopped when I walked in. Willow, she said, her voice trembling. I told you. I know what you told me, I said. I walked to the coffee table and slammed the deed transfer down on top of my father's Wall Street Journal. Explain this, I said. My father looked at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He just stared at his own signature. Where did you get that? He asked. His voice was hoarse. Public records. Dad, you taught me to be thorough, remember? Check your sources. Willow. It's just an investment, he said, taking a sip of scotch. His hand was shaking so badly the ice clinked against the glass. Arthur Vane presented it to me. A distressed asset. It was a good price. A distressed asset? I laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. It was my home. You bought my home 3 days before it burned down. I didn't know it was going to burn, he shouted, slamming the glass down. Ideally, it would have shattered, but it just thudded against the coaster. I didn't know. Arthur said we were going to redevelop it. He said we were going to buy out the tenants. Buy them out? I pointed at the paper. With what? Acetone? With master codes at 3 a.m? I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, looking away. You're lying, I said. You doubled the insurance policy. Dad, Marisol found the filing. You bought it. You insured it for triple its value. And then you watched it burn. I didn't light the match, he roared. He stood up, towering over me. I am an investor. I sign papers. I don't know what Vane's people do. Vane's people? I stepped closer to him. You mean the men who threatened Donald Rusk? The men who poisoned my job? Those people? He said nothing. He was breathing hard, his face red. Why? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Why did you do it to me? Why did you leave me in a shelter? Why did you treat me like a stranger? My father didn't answer. He couldn't, but my mother did. Because helping you makes us part of it. I turned to her. She was standing now, the knitting forgotten on the floor. Tears were streaming down her face. What? I asked. Arthur told us, she sobbed. The morning after the fire, he came here. He told us that because you were a tenant, if we gave you money, if we let you stay here, it would look like collusion. It would look like we were paying off a victim. It would connect us to the crime. She walked toward me, reaching out a hand, but stopped short of touching me. We had to distance ourselves. Willow, we had to pretend we were estranged. If the police thought we were close, they would look at your father's finances. They would find the shell company. I stared at them. The horror of it was total. You abandoned me, I said, my voice shaking. Not because you didn't love me, but because you were terrified of getting caught. We were trying to protect the family, my father yelled. Everything I have, this house, my pension, your inheritance, it's all tied up in Vane's funds. If this goes down, we lose everything." "You've already lost everything," I said. "You lost me." I looked at my father. He looked small now, a man who had traded his soul for a seat at the table, only to realize the table was rigged. "Investigator Crown knows," I said. "He knows about the deed, he knows about the insurance, and he's coming for you." My father's face went pale. "You told him?" "I had to," I said. "He's scheduling a formal interview. You're a person of interest. Dad." My father sank back into his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Get out," he whispered. "I'm going," I said. I walked to the door. My mother followed me, weeping silently. "Willow," she choked out. "Please." I opened the front door. The cold night air hit me. "Goodbye, Mom." I stepped out. Before I even reached the bottom step, I heard it, the sound of the heavy oak door closing, and then the distinct, metallic slide of the deadbolt locking into place. They were locking me out, again. But this time, they weren't locking me out to protect themselves. They were locking themselves in with their guilt. I walked to my car. I felt lighter. The confusion was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard drive to finish what they had started. I called Crown. "I saw them," I said. "He admitted he bought it. He admitted he's in deep with Arthur Vane, and he admitted they abandoned me to hide the connection." "Okay," Crown said. "That's enough. I'm bringing them in tomorrow." "Be careful with Vane," I said. "My father is just a pawn. Vane is the player." "We'll get him too," Crown said. "But Willow, watch your back. If Vane knows you turned your father, you are a loose end." "I know," I said. I looked back at the house one last time. The lights in the den went out. "Let them come," I said. "I'm ready." The coffee in the styrofoam cup was lukewarm, but I drank it anyway. I needed the caffeine to keep my hands from shaking. I was sitting in a diner booth across from Elias Crown, 3 blocks from the precinct. It was 7 in the morning. Crown looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His tie was loosened, and there was a shadow of stubble on his jaw that hadn't been there the day before. "The lab results are final," Crown said. Sliding a folder across the table, he kept his voice low, blending with the clatter of silverware and the morning news on the television above the counter. I didn't open the folder. "Tell me." "It wasn't just acetone," Crown said. "The samples from the stairwell contained traces of a localized accelerant, something sophisticated. It burns hot and evaporates almost completely. The kind of stuff you don't buy at a hardware store." "So it was a professional job," I said. "Without a doubt. And the ignition point? It definitely wasn't your flickering outlet. We found burn patterns indicating the fire started simultaneously in 3 separate locations in the basement. The electrical panel, the stairwell support beams, and the records room." "The records room," I repeated, "where the tenant files were supposed to be." "Exactly. They didn't just want to burn the building. Willow, they wanted to erase the history of the building. They wanted to incinerate every maintenance request, every complaint, every piece of paper that proved negligence." Crown leaned forward, his eyes intense. "If the insurance company gets wind of this, and they will, because I'm going to tell them, this triggers a massive fraud investigation. We are talking about federal charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, arson, conspiracy." "Who goes down?" I asked. "Everyone," Crown said. "The shell companies will peel away like layers of an onion. Halden goes down, Vane goes down, the investors go down." "My father," I said. Crown nodded. "Yes, your father, and anyone who helped them cover it up. When this breaks, the rats are going to scramble. They will panic. And panicked people make dangerous mistakes." My phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a call. It was a message. I glanced at the screen. It was from a private number. I picked it up. There was no text at first, just an image. I tapped to download it. My breath caught in my throat. It was a photo taken from a car window. It showed a parking lot. In the center of the frame was a battered red Toyota Corolla, Marisol's car, which I had borrowed for the night because my rental had a flat tire. The car was parked outside my motel room. The room number, 114, was clearly visible on the door in the background. The photo had been taken at night, last night. Below the image were 5 words: "Stop, or you will lose more." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold, a numbness spreading from my fingertips up my arms. "Willow?" Crown asked sharply. "What is it?" I turned the phone around and showed him. Crown stared at the image. His jaw tightened until a muscle jumped in his cheek. "When was this received?" "Just now," I whispered. "But the photo, that was last night. I was asleep in that room. Someone was outside my door watching me sleep." "They are escalating," Crown said. "They know we are meeting. They know you are the link." "What do I do?" I asked. "I can't go back there." "You won't," Crown said. "We are moving up the interview. I'm bringing your parents in today. Right now, we are going to break this wide open before Vane can send anyone else to a parking lot." I called Marisol from the car. I didn't tell her about the photo. I didn't want to terrify her, but she heard the tension in my voice. "Go public," Marisol urged. "Willow, we have the evidence. We have the emails. We have Donald's statement. Let's call the news. Let's put it on social media. If everyone is watching. They can't hurt you." "I can't," I said, staring out the window as Crown drove us to the station. "Why not? Sunlight is the best disinfectant." "Because they've already painted me as crazy," I said. HR fired me because of an anonymous tip that I was unstable. If I go to the press now, without an arrest, without official charges, Vane will spin it. He'll say I'm a disgruntled tenant with a vendetta and a history of mental health issues. He'll destroy my credibility before I even open my mouth. "So we just wait?" Marisol asked, frustrated. "We don't wait," I said. "We get them on the record. Today." The interview room was exactly like it looked in the movies. Gray walls, a metal table, a two-way mirror that hummed with unseen observation. The air was cold and smelled of floor cleaner and fear. When I walked in, my parents were already there. They were sitting on opposite sides of the table. My father looked 10 years older than he had the night before. His skin was the color of old parchment, gray and translucent. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was crooked. My mother was staring at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. She was wearing her Sunday coat, as if she were going to church. They looked up when I entered. My mother's eyes filled with tears instantly. My father looked away, focusing on a scratch in the metal table. "You have the right to an attorney," Crown said, standing by the door. "You have waived that right for this preliminary interview. Is that correct?" "We have nothing to hide," my father said. His voice was a rasp. "We are here to clear up a misunderstanding." "Sit down, Willow," Crown said. I sat at the head of the table, forming a triangle with my parents. I felt a strange, vibrating clarity. The fear from the morning was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Mr. Bryant," Crown began, opening a thick file in front of him. "Let's talk about Obsidian Holdings." "It is a passive investment vehicle," my father said automatically. It sounded like a line he had rehearsed in front of a mirror. "I provided capital for a real estate portfolio managed by Arthur Vane. I have no operational control." "You signed the deed transfer," Crown said, 3 days before the fire." "Administrative," my father said. "Paperwork." Crown slid a document across the table. It wasn't the deed. It was a bank record. "This is a loan guarantee," Crown said. "Dated 6 months ago. You pledged your personal assets, your home, your retirement accounts, to secure a $2 million line of credit for Halden Properties. That is not passive. Mr. Bryant, that is all in." My father stared at the paper. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "Arthur said it was a bridge loan," he mumbled. "He said the liquidity was tight, but the assets were solid. He said he needed a name with a clean credit history to satisfy the bank." So you leveraged everything, I said. You bet our family home on a slumlord. I did it to protect the family, my father snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The sudden noise made my mother jump. The markets were down. My pension was shrinking. Arthur promised a 20% return in 6 months. I was trying to secure your mother's future. By burning down mine? I asked. I didn't know, he shouted. I told you. I didn't know about the fire. Crown didn't blink. He pulled another paper from the stack. This one was a blueprint, or rather, a safety inspection report attached to a blueprint. This is the annual safety certification for 412 West 4th Street, Crown said. Dated last year, it certifies that the sprinkler system was tested and functional. It certifies that the fire alarms were up to code. It allowed the building to remain open. He pushed it toward my father. Look at the signature on the certification approval. My father looked. His face went from gray to white. He stopped breathing. I leaned over to look. The signature wasn't my father's. It was the stamp of a firm, Bryant Associates Consulting. That's your firm, I whispered. You retired 5 years ago, Dad, but you kept the license active. Arthur asked me. My father's voice was barely audible. He said the city inspector was backed up. He said it was a formality. He said the building was fine. He just needed a certified engineer to sign off on the paperwork so they wouldn't get fined for a delay. You signed a safety inspection without inspecting the building, Crown said. His voice was like a hammer. You pencil-whipped a death trap. I trusted him, my father cried. He's my friend. He's not your friend, Crown said. He's your handler. He used you, Mr. Bryant. He needed a patsy, someone to guarantee the loans, someone to sign the fraudulent safety reports, someone to buy the building right before the arson. He set you up to take the fall for everything. My father slumped in his chair. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had just realized that the ground he had been standing on for 20 years was actually a trap door. I looked at my mother. She was weeping silently, tears dripping onto her coat. Did you know? I asked her. I knew we were in trouble, she whispered. I knew your father was worried about money. I knew Mr. Vane was helping us. Helping us? I laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. Mom, he was blackmailing you. Why do you think he came to the house the morning after the fire? To comfort you? No. He came to make sure you kept your mouth shut. He came to tell you that if you helped me, if you gave me $1, the police would find out about the loan and the inspection. My mother looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. We didn't know it could hurt anyone, she said. We thought it was just money. We thought if we just stayed quiet, it would go away. We didn't want to lose the house. Willow, it's all we have. You didn't want to lose the house, I repeated. I felt something crack inside me. It wasn't the heartbreak I had felt in the motel room. It wasn't the rage I had felt in the parking lot. It was clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity. They hadn't abandoned me because they didn't love me. In their own twisted, fearful way. They probably did love me, but they loved their image more. They loved the colonial house with the black shutters more. They loved the idea of being respectable, retired people more. They loved the illusion of safety more than they loved the reality of their daughter. They had traded my survival for their reputation. You made a choice, I said. My voice was calm. You chose the house over me. You chose Arthur Vane over me. Willow. No, my father croaked. Yes, I said. And now, you're going to lose both. Crown stood up. Marcus Bryant, I am detaining you for questioning regarding insurance fraud, falsification of safety records, and conspiracy to commit arson. My father didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just put his head in his hands. Crown looked at my mother. Mrs. Bryant, we will need a statement from you as well. My mother reached across the table. Her hand trembled as she tried to touch my arm. Willow, she sobbed, what are you going to do? I pulled my arm back. I stood up. I'm going to finish it, I said. I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell the jury everything. about the phone calls, about the refusal to help, about the voicemail you left me warning me to be quiet. You would send us to prison? She asked, horrified. No, I said. You sent yourselves. I'm just turning on the light. I turned to walk out of the room. I couldn't look at them anymore. The sight of their smallness, their cowardice, was too painful. Suddenly, the door to the interview room opened. A uniformed officer stuck his head in. He looked urgent. Crown, he said. You need to take this. Line 1. It's the fire chief. Crown frowned. He stepped out into the hallway. I stood by the door, waiting. My parents sat in silence, the air in the room heavy with the wreckage of our family. A minute later, Crown came back. His jaw was set hard. His eyes were cold. He looked at me, then at my father. That was the chief, Crown said. There has been a fire. Where? I asked. A self-storage facility on the outskirts of the city, Crown said. Specifically, a unit registered to Halden Properties, the unit where we suspected they were moving the physical archives from the management office. It burned? I asked. To the ground, Crown said. The call came in 10 minutes ago. It's a total loss. Whatever paper trail was left, it's gone. My father let out a small, strangled sound. It might have been relief. Crown turned to him. Don't get comfortable, Marcus. Paper burns. Digital forensics don't. And witnesses? He looked at me. Witnesses remember. I looked at Crown. The evidence was burning again. Vane was cleaning house. He was destroying everything that could link him to the crimes. But he had forgotten one thing. He couldn't burn me. I looked at my parents one last time. They looked like strangers, ghosts in a life I had already left behind. Let's go, I said to Crown. We have work to do. I walked out of the police station into the bright, cold light of the afternoon. The wind bit at my face. I didn't know where I was going to sleep tonight. I didn't know how I was going to pay for my next meal. I didn't know if the gray sedan was waiting for me around the corner, but as I stood on the precinct steps, I realized something. I wasn't the victim in the ashes anymore. I was the fire. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the smoke and mirrors of betrayal, and I hope Willow's fight for the truth resonated with you. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. And please share your thoughts on the ending in English. Would you have forgiven the parents? Or did Willow make the right choice? Until next time, stay safe and watch who you trust.